think we have come to the end of this day's session. I have with me Richard Collard from IBM, Devendra from HDFC, and Uma from Access. So we thought we'll have some session with these people, and we have a learned panel over here. The questions were largely from the audience. We did a poll to find out what is of interest, what is that the people are looking for. So I have some questions which have been picked up from the audience, which I'll raise to the panelists. And then we'll have a Q&A session. That would be the way we'll move forward. So please feel free to stop us or ask any questions in between if you may have. So to start with, I'll put my question to Richard first to understand, being from IBM, some of the things which were bubbling in the minds of the audience was that what are the various tools that you're adopting in order to ensure that we detect the details of fraud or activities of similar nature? So how is IBM really helping in that direction and building those tools?
Thank you very much. Oh yes, I need that, don't I? Good. Thank you, Vikas. First and foremost, it's not just about IBM. As I said in my presentation this morning, a lot of this is around it's around complementary capabilities. I joined IBM 5.5 years ago through an acquisition, and it was something of a culture shock coming into IBM. There are a lot of people in IBM who believe we can do absolutely everything. And we can do a lot of things. I mean, we have groundbreaking capabilities. We have the Watson supercomputer, which is being deployed. Nedbank in South Africa has taken licenses for it, Development Bank of Singapore using it in different areas around understanding customers better, customer motivations. Not many other companies can do that. I got a mail this morning, one of the banking technology, IBM has been awarded another patent around mobile device security, encrypting data so that not even the service provider can actually see the details of the device. These sort of things are groundbreaking. Now, whether or not we actually commercialize them is another thing altogether. As far as fraud, as far as financial crimes, as far as compliance is concerned, we have a complete hypermarket. I could use the expression Walmart here, but I probably daren't. But we've got a supermarket of capabilities, which can be, in and of themselves, are very, very viable, but combined can actually provide groundbreaking functionality. Talking a bit earlier, we've worked with Barclays Bank, for example, in the AML and financial crime space, where we've addressed specific problems that Barclays had in that space. They had believed for at least 3 years that they had customers transacting illegally and inappropriately from their Gulf operation in Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, with sanctioned entities and countries, Iran, Iraq. They'd believed this for 3 years. They had been unable to prove it. Combination of capabilities that we had, mining unstructured text and data, presenting that into an advanced visual analysis tool, I2, using case management to govern that. We identified 6 inappropriate transactional relationships, 1 personal, 5 commercial, at 4 and 5 degrees of separation. That's colossal. We all know that the fraudsters go to extreme lengths to make sure that they don't get caught. They will use blinds, they will use shell companies, they will use their budgerigars as company directors. The reality is that there are fewer places for these guys to hide with this combination of capabilities. Now, that is not to say that there are not packaged solutions out there, and I honestly don't consider them to be competition. I think that we play in a complementary space. So I don't see Actimize, Detica, Falcon, I don't see those as competitors. I see those as capabilities that we can complement and supplement. So I am absolutely, IBM published a paper that I authored last year which was entitled When Transaction Monitoring is Not Sufficient. Moving on from ticking the box around transaction monitoring and looking at complementary capabilities. The authorities around the world are setting the bar higher, and rightly so. They are creating the valid business reason for investment in this space to drive out the fraudsters. Again, opportunistic fraud is still a cost of doing business. It's not fun, it is a cost, but again, if you can stop the hemorrhage, that's a good thing. The real bad guys are the organized ones, the gangs that actually fund terrorism, that fund 9/11, 26/11, 5th of July in London. We've all experienced that. We've all suffered that in our respective jurisdictions. And it is incumbent, I think, upon each and every one of us here that represents a financial institution to loathe and detest those people and find the best ways possible that we can. All that to say, yes, IBM has a lot of capabilities. We have paradigms, we have solutions, we have combinations of those which a lot of other organizations cannot bring together. The other thing that we do bring is the integration capability. Again, the ability to integrate seamlessly and in as risk-free an environment as possible. All that to say, I thoroughly respect all of the complementary capabilities that are out there. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all capability. But I'm very, very proud to sit here and represent IBM and to be able to share with you sort of some of the Barclays experience we had. I can bore for Britain about what we've done and what we've achieved, believe me. But that is one of the sort of the achievements that has actually led us on. And now we have, as of the 20th of March last year, we've announced the IBM Counter-Fraud Solution. Integration of best-of-breed components to provide detection and prevention capabilities, along with investigation that will address fraud, financial crimes perpetrators.
Thanks, Richard. I think that was very insightful as to what we have today as a tool. And I think you rightly touched upon the mobile device security, which is the in thing presently, at least in India, where mobile banking is really picking up and most of the institutions are looking forward to it. I think the users are increasing on a daily basis, if you ask me. So that's going to be the way banking is heading for. A lot of advertisements we can see these days, a lot of capabilities being built in. And I think that's the right approach when you mentioned that it's a combination of capabilities and integrating what tools we have. And that's very essential when it comes to the monitoring activity or activities which are required by the financial institutions. So I think that's a good start to understand where we stand in terms of offerings that are there, in terms of tools that may be available today. And with that, let me move on to Devendra and ask him, on the HDFC front, which is a large institution having far-reaching, presence, really good penetration. How do you see yourself training your people and reaching out to them, especially when they are, in far-off places? Today, we have institutions which do not have that kind of presence and are still struggling to manage and reach out to people in terms of the tools and in terms of the training requirements. So how do you see yourself preparing for it, and what are the tools that you're adopting to reach out in terms of training and reaching out to the people?
Training plays a very important part in AML KYC subject. I think in 2005, when the PMLA Act was enacted, and the FIO was conducted a training, train the trainer. And that play a very key role because statistical figure shows whenever we get the AML training, the benchmark depends on how many STRs you raised, suspicious transaction reports. And the training plays a very key role. If you see the statistical figure, after the FIO conducted the training in 2008 and 9, comparing the same figure with 2011 and 12, there is a rise in STR by 1,470%. See the ratio. In 2008 and 9, hardly 4,400 STR was raised. But after this particular training conducted, the STR ratio has gone to a multiple fold to 70,000 STRs in 2011 and 12. So with this training plays a very important part. Everybody is aware, each bank is having their proper policy, having the proper procedure, detailed procedure. We are aware at the head office level. But the person working in the remote place is aware about the AML KYC. Question is, we require to train him. And by which way we can train him? Physical presence, face-to-face training is not possible to go in a rural branch and train 2 or 3 bank branch people over there. And where the technology play very, very key role. Generally, we understand that, as you are aware, under Section 24 of the PMLA Act, it's on the accused to prove he is not guilty under this particular act, as you are aware. And the punishment is quite harsh under the PMLA Act. If you prove guilty under this act, punishment may go from 3 years to 7 years. But are that person employee at the remote branch is aware about that particular Section 24? Because each bank will say, I have a proper policy, proper procedure, but he has not abided by the particular thing, guidelines. He has not done proper due diligence of the client. So we need to train him. We need to make him understand why he has to collect the documents, what's the reason behind it. It's in the interest of the bank or the financial institutions, as well as in the interest of the particular employee. Now, answering your question, to reach that kind of level, since HDFC having a 4,000 branches approximately, and I think as Axis Bank is also having going to 4 digits, it is possible only through technology, through the web-based training. That's I'm emphasizing on. At the time of joining, let them go through the induction training. There we can present the AML and some kind of guidance we can give them. But this kind of training is annually required. Repetitive hammering is required on AML KYC. And that can be achieved only through technology, web-based training. Make it compulsory in your system. Annually, you require to click that particular link is given to him, take the test, pass that particular test, it's fine. You will be logged into the system. So logbook will be maintained for that particular employee. So far reaching 60,000 employees or 70,000 employees, I am talking in a very general terms, this is the only solution available. Thank you.
Thanks, Devendra. I think we can understand the complexity, and especially we have members from the government sector and nationalized banks also. So we empathize with the kind of network that has been built and the reach that banks have today. And it's not simple, as you rightly mentioned. There is no one tool that can be adopted to train people across. And especially when you have to ensure that it's not just training being imparted, but it has to be repeated, because, you know, it's always said, no matter how much training you provide, it's still less. You have to keep repeating. You have to keep doing, because people also have memory which is very short. They do something, and, you know, with so many other things that they are managing, one tends to forget. So it is important that you train them regularly, and then just not training them, but how do you maintain the trail? How do you maintain the evidence? So having it on the system or through a learning university or, you know, web-based, where it is duly documented and captured, is fairly critical. So, you know, I fully appreciate and thanks for sharing it with the audience here. So it's just not about managing people and the expectations and their training. I would like to ask Uma especially that while training is one end of the requirement, the question which the audience also had, that there is a challenge in the current times with regards to managing the regulatory expectation. So the regulators have come out with recent guidelines with regards to KYC updation, which is quite a challenging task, especially for banks which have legacy customers and have been there for years. How do you reach out to them? And how practical is it to be with them and managing it? So just wanted to understand how, as an institution, you are looking at that aspect and managing it.
Yeah, at Axis Bank, what we have initially started off with this major challenge of a re-KYC exercise is that we have tried to look at our database on the basis of the volume, of transactions that are run through. Let me start by going a step backwards. The risk categorization is something which RBI, I think all of us are aware, RBI has been emphasizing repeatedly that when you onboard a customer, you identify the risks which you are about to experience on account of taking this customer in. And it is at this stage that we put certain checks and balances to find out what would be the risk associated with the client. Now, going along, it is not possible to, monitor every account on a minute basis, going by the volume of transactions. I think that goes for all of us because the kind of manpower that we have and the kind of volume of transactions that get churned every day. We look at a process of a 6-monthly review of accounts and then try to see where we stand as far as the risk categorization of each of these individual set of accounts are. Now, reaching out to all of them, I think it's easier said than done, that you send letters, you send emails, because all of us have a lot of technological capabilities, like Devendra just mentioned, that you try to reach them out in various ways, because you have the ATMs as another front to keep telling the customer that, yes, please visit your bank and submit your KYC. You have the other internet channels as well. But then all along, I don't know, end of the day, one constantly feels that a customer is bogged down with so much of information from all the banks. He says at a stage, chalo, it's okay. I guess it'll pass on. But least realizing that this is not a one-day affair. RBI is taking it pretty seriously. And the hit rate, like all of us have, I think all of us are on the same plane. It's just that the drive needs to be kept on and on. The other major challenge that we also face is for various, identity and address proofs of people who are moving. Falling back on certain documents again gets to be a difficulty because like what Vikas has just now mentioned, there's no one size fits all. I say that yes, I can take one particular lease agreement and I feel it's fine. Then tomorrow I have another 10 issues cropping up saying that this was not registered and how did you take it and how did you manage to open an account like this? And on the other side, you also have RBI singing another song by saying that yes, you need to serve every client. So I think this is a kind of double-edged sword we're all here to live with. We try to improvise some systems day in and day out. Yes, the challenges are there, but I think going along, sharing experiences like in forums like this, we would definitely be able to see light. And RBI is looking at it in a pretty serious way. They are also aware of the kind of problems that we are grappling because we keep liaising with them often and on. And let's see, as we move, now that the period for the risk categorization has changed, so automatically how much we demand customers to submit documents has also undergone a slight bit of a laxity. But nevertheless, the guns are always trained. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Uma. I'm sure we don't have regulators over here, but nevertheless, I think our regulators, since I interact very closely and I've been interacting with them for almost now more than 8 years, both RBI and FIU, I think they are becoming very realistic, if you ask me. I know this guideline has been bothering the entire financial industry for quite some time, which is about KYC updation and how do you meet, as Uma rightly mentioned, that how far can you reach out to the customer? How much can you ask from the customer? You have a risk categorization already in place. So is there really a need to go back to every customer? And once you have done the risk categorization, then how do you meet the FATF standards, which talks about a risk-based approach? So if you have idly risk rated your customers into high, medium, low, or in any manner, 1, 2, 3, whatever you may call it, then what is the purpose if you have to reach out to each and every customer once again? Neither is it a requirement through the FATF, nor is it a requirement across the globe. So understanding that clearly and knowing the dialogue which is going on with the regulators, we are likely to get something very soon. And personally, I would say I'm working very closely with them. So this guideline is getting revised. Keeping my fingers crossed, very shortly we should see something in the favor of the financial institution that is likely to come out. And that is something which then would make more effective impact. We'll all be able to adhere to it. The guideline was out in May 2008, and we can understand the flight of the guideline, that a guideline which was issued by the regulator in 2008 has not been adopted by the financial institutions till date. So it's become very difficult both for the regulator and regulatee to assess that what is in it that needs to be looked at. And I think finally there is some synergy which is prevailing. We'll see some light at the end of the tunnel. So rightly so, I think we all do understand the country regulator is also moving to a regime which is more matured regime. We never had a concept of white paper. As Richard just mentioned, the white paper concept has been well understood in the Western world and all the countries across. But per se in India, the regulator has never issued a white paper to be discussed with the regulatee and then decide the way forward. The guidelines were issued, which were required to be implemented. So I think there is a slow and gradual shift that is happening, which is positive if you ask me. Now, the point on, and Richard did mention that there is no tool or there is no system which can fit all, and there's no one size fits all. But I just wanted to understand, Richard, from the point of view of banks and financial institutions across, that with your understanding and IBM being one of the lead in that, do you think there is a tool which can work for monitoring and cutting across, maybe not in its entirety, but with small modifications? So an institution may adopt a tool, and then with certain modifications or specifications, it can be, I would say, divided between employee-based alerts or customer-based alerts. So do we have something like that which can be worked upon, and if the institution looks forward to it?
Thank you, Vikas. I'd step back a little bit just from that question. And it's like a politician's answer. It's not that I'm not answering the question, but it's maybe putting a bit more context around it. A lot of what we do or what we can achieve in terms of understanding the petabytes of data that exists within our organizations, I say our, in your organizations, it's all about the data. Where is that data stored? How can we access it? And again, that is possibly one of the most critical aspects of this. If you live in a utopian world or a Nirvana-esque empire where data is freely accessible, where you have in place, again, the nirvana of a big data platform, for example, or Hadoop or whatever you care to call it, where data can be consumed across the organization by multiple applications, then I think it's going to be far easier to apply some form of commonality across that. Unfortunately, that is, for the most part, it's an aspirational state. It requires a lot of vision. The tone from the top is absolutely key here to adopt a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar policy that will, strategy rather, that will allow standardization of data on a platform that would allow it to be consumed across the organization. Now, what I've seen with a couple of institutions in the United Kingdom, again, nowhere near the size of what we're talking about here in India, but the problem is pretty much the same. A big data project will be undertaken, and then all of a sudden, somebody will work out, well, hang on, we need some business applications to hang on this. And I guarantee you that the two applications that will hang on that straight away will be fraud and financial crimes and marketing. Those are the two areas. That's what we need to know more about our customers so that we can sell them more and so that we can actually better understand their motives and actually understand whether or not their behavior is commensurate and appropriate with a good customer. So if one has that in place, then I think you can actually standardize around applications. You can actually standardize around case management. You can certainly standardize around procedures, processes for effective KYC or imposition of KYC protocols. Customer onboarding. Does that then allow you to go one step further, to actually go into KYC 2, know your customer's customer? Because it's a reality. Some jurisdictions require it. And it is probably prudential to think about that as a future state. Again, can that be done? I think standardization of case management at the operational level is absolutely key to making sure that you have staff that are interoperable within a domain, within a fraud domain, within a compliance domain with AML, with financial crimes. I think that's absolutely key. So there are different ways of coming at this. I think there's the bottom-up approach, there's the top-down approach. But I think probably the key components that can be addressed this from the operational perspective are definitely an effective case management system that can be modified, manipulated, and configured to address the multiple requirements across the organization, and that can drive workflow effectively so that you are automating as much of the process as possible. Again, taking the drudge out of it and making sure that decisions that have to be made are made. And again, then being able to consume other capabilities of that from an investigation perspective. But again, it is, for me, it's predicated on that, on the big data platform.
Thanks, Richard. I think, so what I can understand and what we can get out of it is, yes, there are capabilities which may exist, but the more important point is how is the data stored within the institution, and more importantly, how is it accessible? So do we have systems which talk to each other? I think that's the real challenge, because over the period of time, while institutions have bought in more systems or implemented newer technology, no one really realized that are they talking to each other? Is there a software that is available which is making them compatible? So the data may be available, but in different platforms. So even if the tool or a solution is there today, how do we extract that data? How do we bring it together? And more importantly, can we understand our customers better? So you may have a customer who's dealing with many customers, and they also might be your customers, but is the capability existing within the institution to capture that? And if it is, then only it can be ported onto something as a simple tool or as a conduit, I would say, which can then work hand in hand. So I think more importantly, getting the point, let me try to understand, especially from Devin, that on the HDFC front, how are you really enhancing your technology or your program since the times are changing, the requirements are changing? So how is the bank really gearing up in terms of improving the technology platform, and what are the changes that are being brought about in order to keep up the speed?
I will only talk about the AML front, how the technology we are adopting. Now, thieves are always one step ahead than the police, as you know. If you think about 10 years back or 15 years back, what our salary scale was and what's the scale right now, that means our economic cycle has changed. System and pattern of doing fraud has changed. It's more technology driven now. And manually it's not possible. Only solution is, again, technology. When I'm doing the transaction monitoring or some kind of thing trying to find out the fraud things, there is some alert system getting generated. And all the system works on the only one parameter, scenario analysis, giving some threshold limit. Threshold limit is based on my economic cycle, as I said earlier, and it's keep on changing. And periodically, like a transistor, we require to fine-tune that particular threshold limit. So based on that threshold limit, the scoring pattern will come and the transaction will get filtered it out. Then the actual manual analysis take place. So to filter the transactions, we require to periodically fine-tune that particular threshold limit. That's an alert system. It's very key role it plays. System is there, it's a dumb system, but the brain is required behind that how and what kind of alert issued throughout. I think that answered my questions.
Well, thanks, Devin. I think that's very valid a point. How do you really look at the technology today? How do you get the output, and what do you do with that? So how do you risk categorize and use the data usefully? I think it's a real challenge because, as mentioned by Richard also and the panelists, that the data is available. In what form and shape it is available? How are you using it? Is it getting integrated? I think that's where the key is coming up. And as we are growing with times, we have people who are moving faster than what we expect. So yes, indeed, the people who are there as a group or as a cartel or who have decided to deceive the financial institutions, they are one step ahead. So if you're deciding a particular thing, while you're working on it and your trigger is based on the event is becoming older. So there's a new typology which is building up, which you are completely unaware of. And I think we have several such instances to handle multi-level marketing companies. While we were all struggling to look at multi-level marketing companies, and we were saying, oh, how do we protect the financial institutions from them? We realized that the boiler room fraud started happening. Once we started working on the boiler room frauds, we said, oh, while we're working on this, how do you look at, job frauds and lottery frauds which started coming in? While we started working on that, the phishing activity came into play. So I think while for the financial institutions, the trigger point is certainly what's happened or what's happening, the people who are working on this are a step ahead. And we come to know it at a later stage, oh, this is the new one. And when you start working towards it, you realize that that new one is no more a new one. It's become an old activity. There's a fresh one which is in the making or it's going live. So I think with that, Uma, I would like to understand, and that was something which was again bubbling in the minds of the audience, which I captured, that as an institution, how are you prepared and bringing in increased focus on the newer typologies or programs that are coming up?
Yeah. Compliance as a business unit, practically I would call it a business unit because of the importance that it has taken over the years. Reserve Bank of India, when it started bringing in this emphasis on compliance, it was at its nascent stages. And then as we have come along, we have realized that compliance, if taken seriously, is good for business. Now, every institution, all of us here, we are kind of, caught between two worlds. One is business and the other is compliance. Now, it is very easy to mention that, yes, if a business is done in a compliant manner, then it's good for all. But then, all said and done, you have people right at the bottom line who might not give that kind of an importance to the compliance as a important tool to be taken care of while conducting business. Now, this emphasis has been, constantly being pushed down from top at Axis Bank. And like Deven was also mentioning, we've been trying to drive it force and hard that compliance has to be taken seriously. Otherwise, the kind of showdowns that we have with the regulators is not something we would really yearn for. Like Vikas was mentioning, we've had fraudsters who are one step ahead of us. And then why is all this compliance being talked about? Compliance is primarily being talked about to take care that the financial institution is kept safe. But how safe are we? How much are we protecting ourselves against all these, wrong things that are happening around us is something which we are grappling with every day. Trying to make business also understand that this is not the way. Otherwise, we are not going to slip again and we're going to fall again. So we've been learning from the past, and yes, systems and procedures, processes are really built in well. And it is up to us to try to keep training them, keep making the fear of God get into them that yes, business done well and done in a compliant way is always good for all of us to sail across as a bank. Yeah.
Okay, I think thanks, Uma. Rightly so, you call the compliance as a business unit as well, and everyone has his own interest or her own interest. And when it comes to business, you have business which is driving revenues, and most of the time, I think people sitting over here are part of the cost center, so-called. So you are not giving any contribution to the institution, but you're only adding to the cost, and that's why this is called a cost center. But more importantly, one should realize that a cost center may be adding to the cost, but it's saving a lot of value for the institution, both in terms of reputational risk, regulatory penalties, and more importantly, the confidence of the shareholders and customers. So I think this is well understood now, especially in the recent past with what the financial institutions have gone through. The management has understood it's a top-down approach which wasn't seen earlier or maybe missing in certain institutions. I think that's fairly visible, and that's why we are having forums of this nature where we are putting the emphasis on compliance. And rightly so, I think compliance, if you ask me from 10 years back when I moved into the AML KYC world, we really had to talk to people and put the fear of God. Saying, oh, if you do this, you'll never be spared. You'll be remembered only for bad things. So put that fear of God in them and say, oh, please abide by it. We were requesting and pleading people, don't do it. But I think as I see the change, and it's a gradual shift, especially at the country level and in the financial institutions, now compliance is taken very seriously. If you opine something, someone is not there to say, no, we are not following it, right? There may be an argument, there may be a discussion, and I call that healthy discussion, may it be in the form of argument or may it be in the form of a prolonged discussion. But at the end of it, there are people who are listening, who are understanding. Things do get escalated, but somewhere, I think if your advisory is correct, and I call it, your advisory has to be correct, just not for the sake of your own personal ego or that you have put something across, but rightly so, the role of compliance is to provide the correct advisory. I think today there is a need to assess every regulation and requirement coming from any regulator or any guideline and assess the shades of gray. So if the gray is really gray, I'm sure one should not tread it. But if the shades of gray are lighter, there are opportunities, you need to interpret it well, you need to guide people rightly, and that's real advisory which comes out from compliance, because compliance does not mean no every time. And if it means no, then I don't think that's real compliance. So you have to understand the guideline, give the right rationale and justification, see where you can partner with the business and where you need to clearly say no. Because there is no middle path if you ask me. It's either going with it, with your interpretation, or saying, no, we cannot do this. So it's important, and I think that's rightly brought out by all our panelists, that putting all these things together, and if you were to sum up, the integration tools are available. But depends how much you have already invested, what are the tools that are existing within the institution, how have you stored your data, how have you trained your people, how have you risk categorized your customers, what are the monitoring tools or thresholds, as mentioned, adopted by you, is there a right fix or there is a need to revisit? And I think in the current environment, there is a need for a constant change. So you need to keep revisiting, you need to keep rebuilding, because if you do not do that, you will be lost out. You will lose the race. So with that, I think we come to an end for the questions that I had picked up, but I would open it to the audience. If you have any questions, I would ask you to please first identify yourself, and then please let us know whom the question